But yeah, I think improvisation is like such an inspiring process for me. Like I always get something out of it, even if it was, let's never do that again. That's like really useful because nobody ever needs to hear some of that stuff.
Welcome to the first episode of the Music Now podcast. This is a new podcast from The Skinny, where we speak to Scottish musicians about their music and how they make it. I'm Laurie Presswood, and in this first episode we're talking to Malin Lewis, a piper, fiddler, instrument maker and composer from Skye. Me and Malin have a chat about their approach to songwriting, some surprising influences on their sound, their love of improv, and we also do a deep dive on Trans, the standout track from their debut album Halocline. This episode is sponsored by the Queen's Hall, Edinburgh, where Malin is programming a series of concerts throughout 2025. The next show is on 31st of May, and Malin talks us through the lineup later on in the episode. But we start by talking about Malin's new theatre/dance/music project, Nought For Glory, a really exciting new piece of work that doubles as a form of therapy for anyone who spent their childhood in the world of youth arts competitions. Enjoy! Hi Malin, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
I was watching quite a few interviews with you where the backdrop is like beautiful slow motion drone shots of like a rolling coastline. So I am so happy to welcome you here into a building that has frequently topped lists of Edinburgh's ugliest buildings.
Amazing. I love brutalist architecture.
I'm so glad you said that. We had a bit of a conversation earlier about potentially starting with, like a set question or sort of a set lowball question for the kind of opener of the podcast. But actually, the kind of natural opener is that I came to see your fantastic show last night, Nought For Glory, which I don't think there's a ton about it on the internet or in the public sphere at the moment. It's a sort of dance, theatre, music piece. Would you say it's dance primarily?
It's like dance, theatre, gig, and I think it's comedy as well. Like the two performers, Charlie and Jack, which I'll tell you more about, they're just like the funniest people. They are amazing. So I think it should be like on the comedy circuits, and it happens to have some dancing.
Yeah, it's very fun. I didn't expect it to be so funny. So for those who don't know about it, which I think actually will be quite a lot of people because I don't think it's not been shared publicly much at the moment. It is essentially a show it's about a lot of things, but at its core, it's about the dynamics of youth music and dance competition culture, specifically in the kind of Celtic world.
Yeah. It's three performers, myself, an Irish dancer and a Highland dancer. And it examines our lives growing up in the competition world, but then we've each had this sort of like shift to the contemporary. And then this show was like us kind of looking back at the past and thinking about how it's shaped us as performers. So Charlie's a Highland dancer gone contemporary dancer. Jack is a Irish dancer gone ballet and contemporary dance. And then I have come from kind of pipe band competitions and solo bagpiping competitions to whatever kind of obscure bagpiping I do in different things. So we've each got this kind of shared tradition to contemporary, and then this is really looking back at our tradition and kind of reminiscing about that. Yeah,
it was fantastic. I didn't really know what to expect, but it's very unexpected. That's a lame way of describing it, but it really was just so much of everything. I don't know how much you want to give away because this was a preview.
So yeah, we've just done a couple of performances of it, and then there should be lots more in 2026. But what I will say is there's actually very little bagpiping, Irish or Highland dance in the show. It's kind of all of our contemporary take and feelings through movement and sound, and sort of dissecting and taking apart like the traditions and at times misogyny or at times like difficult things that we had growing up, as well as the joyful things that we loved and made us who we are today as performers.
Yeah, I think all of that really came through. I felt such a kind of the full spectrum of human emotion. There were bits of it that I found really moving and really kind of emotional, and also, like you say, really funny, and I learned a lot as well. I think I'd never really thought about it really examines kind of the relationship between, I guess, like, misogyny and patriarchy and tradition, essentially. Yeah, and the way that kind of is trapping for everybody, you know?
Yeah. It's been really gorgeous performing it for people because we've had We've had such lovely audiences, and especially in Edinburgh last night, we had a sellout in Dance Space. And people just like, either people have their own like direct experiences that they can relate to it, or people were coming up afterwards and just like some sort of childhood hobby or something that they did or they struggled with and spent time with and then maybe forgot about. And it's just been really beautiful hearing about people's kind of memories that have been brought up. And that's been, I think for me, that's the most like interesting reaction that's happened, is like people sort of going back into themselves and like thinking about why it is they did these things and why they continued or didn't continue. And there's been a couple of people going, oh my God, I did love like Highland dancing, and like, why did I stop? Do you know what I mean? And like, these are people in their 50s and 60s and going and talking about like starting to dance again. And I think that's incredible. Like, that's one of the most exciting things to hear from an audience.
Yeah, I had that response as well, not least because completely unrelated to the actual work, but there was someone in the audience who was in my contemporary dance class when I was 10. And I remember being like completely obsessed with her because she was this amazing dancer. And I remember there was one show where I got to do like a really small kind of like duet that opened the show with this girl whose name I can't remember, but she was sitting right at the front, and I kept looking over and being like, it's like I've been transported. And yeah, it kind of unlocked this whole, this whole box of experiences and emotions.
Yeah. And I won't say too much about it, but I think like a big goal of the piece was to try and put the audience in different scenarios. So kind of trying to like pick out like the weirdest and most obscure things of like, I don't know, like a Highland Games or something, like the absurdity of some of these like situations that you end in, and it becomes so normalized in a beautiful way, but kind of trying to bring audiences into that. So at times like the audience is in the space and the dancing is happening in amongst, and it's kind of, I feel like it jumps between casual and performing, and all these things, like to me they tap into this like these experiences that you have at these like events, like a competition, and it's like super terrifying, and you know, you've got kids like bawling their eyes out, but also these people are like volunteers, and they're also like, you know, the uncle of somebody you know, it's like a family friend, but it's like, and a school will be converted into this sort of like Olympic stadium type thing. It's like, you know, the most important bagpiping competition in the Highlands. It's like in the foyer of a school. So it's like trying to like bring audiences into this world, and maybe they understand it completely, or maybe they've never heard of it, and it's like just coming on that journey with everyone else together is nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was the process like for writing the music for that, without giving too much away?
I guess I've initially got involved by coming to do a one-day improv with Charlie and Jack, and we just totally gelled, and it seemed like the right thing. So it began really with the bagpipes, because we were really trying to kind of hone in on our experiences and our kind of like, I guess a lot of it is about the kind of like cycles that we go through, and the way like they come at it from a very like how you move your body. So for me, I would just like, my initial thing was to come in and just pick the pipes up and start playing, and I was like, I'm going to improvise music. And they were like, they got really obsessed with like the movement, the body language of like lifting up the instrument. And then we spent just like basically a day like on like the really minutiae, the really, you know, when an instrument or something, maybe a tool or a machine you work with becomes an extension of your body, you move with it. And when you balance something, like pipes is a very unwieldy instrument. And so we just like examined the way that like you balance to pick them up, because they're also quite heavy, for example. And so we did a lot of that, like really zooming in on the language of your form, the language of Highland, the language of Irish. And though, you know, the way that Irish, everyone keeps their arms down by their side, like super still, and you're not supposed to kind of have expression. And Highland dancing, it's all about like hitting this really central spot and kind of like being super precise with that. And, you know, piping, the way that you hold the instrument and you hold yourself. It's all like, it's kind of dance in itself. Do you know what I mean? In a weird way, like the mundane of that kind of, but the beauty in those simple things. So that's how I originally got into it. And I'm not a dancer at all, but I loved being a mover in the space and kind of getting to work with Jack and Charlie in that way. And then through various things, there's techno, there's improv-y, weird sort of like, I guess, difficult or challenging sounds at times. And then there's also just like a few tracks that we've selected for specific reasons that really speak to the piece in general and also the style of the piece. And so there's a big mishmash of music and sound in it. It was such a fun process, like doing that, because it's the first time I've done all of that and been in the space as well, like the composing pre-recorded tracks as well as performing the sounds in the space. And I found that really fascinating, like how sometimes letting go of the fact that like I'm not making the sound live, and other times being like, actually less is more in this case, like just play one thing. Like you don't need a backing track or anything. Just enjoy that. Like I want to tell you lots of things, but I can't tell them without giving stuff away. So
how, when you approach kind of writing for something like that, because you've done other kind of writing for theatre before, haven't you? How does that kind of differ from, or maybe it doesn't, maybe it's more similar to writing music for solo performance or for recording?
I mean, the way in which music is performed and consumed is like whole different worlds. So like even making my album was such a learning curve in terms of the different way people will listen to that compared to a live performance. And there's detail and things that you can capture in a recording, and there's also like energy that you just can't, energy and dynamics that can't be beaten by a live performance. I was lucky enough to be part of the performance of The Strange Undoing of Prudencia Hart that was at the Manchester Royal Exchange, and I had so many like learning opportunities in that, where I realized like the role of sound in a performance like that, where it's not a gig, it's not a music performance, and the way that sound is sort of incidental, or it's really about driving the narrative of a piece. Like when you know, I make instrumental music most of the time, and for a lot of that, it's like I make my stories and my feelings on those tunes, and people can like interpret that in their own way, or they can just listen to it as a piece of music and find their own meaning in it or not. And then doing it for stuff for theatre was like really, the music is serving the purpose of driving the narrative. And I think that was a really fascinating experience, working with like this amazing director, Debbie Hannon, who like we would sometimes just like always be on the same page, and then other times it's like amazing how you can interpret a sound as like channeling one thing and somebody else interprets that totally differently. And I mean, that's like amazing directing skills and things, but this is all very rambly, but like
don't worry about it.
Beautiful. It's beautiful to make music for a performance which is dance, gig, theatre, because you get to do a little bit of all of those things. Some of it is music purely for the sake of making nice music, making enjoyable music. Other bits, it's really to like underscore, and other bits, it's really to like drive the narrative and create a world. Yeah, like finding the flow between that, I guess, is the like exciting bit, because it's finding the energy like flow as well between a whole piece, the ups and the downs, and I really, really loved making it. And I don't think it's completely finished yet.
I'm excited to see what comes next.
Yeah, I am too. We had a few like outside eye people coming to the performance last night, and so we're gonna like share the feedback with them soon, and super excited to like hear what they have to say basically, and think about how we're gonna adapt it or just develop it as it goes on. It's really exciting.
What you were saying about working on music that is kind of more narrative, I think kind of leads me on to what I want to talk to you about next, which is your general approach to writing music. And because I think your music is it feels very narrative. I think the way that it swells and the shifts in the mood make it feel like it feels often like the bagpipes are singing. I don't know if that is. I don't know if that's an odd thing to say, but I feels like there's a real like emotion to it. So I'd love to hear more about when you are sitting down to write a track, what does that process look like?
I always start with melody. That's kind of, to me, that's the most important thing. And as a melody player, it's my most comfortable and natural place. But I try and like find the beauty in the kind of discomfort. So like finding a little interval on the pipes or the fiddle that feels obscure, like it doesn't necessarily feel easy to play. And then kind of like working with that. Sometimes I will get an instrument that I can't play and force myself to like write a tune on it, because it makes me actually listen to the melody and not fall into the patterns of like the shapes my fingers make. So fiddle is tuned in fifths, and so you always are playing like thirds and fourths, and those are the intervals that work easily. When I started working on the Lindsay System small pipes, which are the small pipes on my album,
Which you made from scratch.
Which I made from scratch.
Just in case anyone listening doesn't know that.
So this is like a new bagpipe that's got 2 octaves and is chromatic, and it's super fun, but it doesn't really have a repertoire that exists for it yet. So the process of making that instrument was also like composing new music for it. And the beauty of it was this like layout that I'd never experienced before. And so writing tunes for it, like the tunes, it tells me what it wants to write. It writes the tunes, I feel like, or it's like a collaboration with the instrument, because I haven't had, 15 years of kind of like habitual learning on this thing of like, these are the correct sounds to make. And all of a sudden having that kind of blank canvas, it has different intervals and different sounds and shapes that it just fits naturally under the fingers. And that's been like probably the biggest musical inspiration for me, is like actually having this instrument to write for, in a way. And so it really feels like a collaboration, like working together with it.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So then when you have all these kind of like snippets of melody, what does the next step look like in terms of as you start to piece stuff together?
Yeah, so I guess it begins as a melody, and once that's formed, and I also have that thing of like, it's like the old grey whistle test a little bit, like you've got to keep it in your head like without music or something before writing it down. So once you've got one of those, I'll have ideas of kind of riffs or harmonies and things and like kind of arrangement ideas. But then a lot of it is working with my really wonderful band. So there's a guitarist, Ali Hutton, and Sally Simpson on fiddle, and we'll kind of just get together and play the stuff and then sort of semi-improvise along with each other, and maybe try out some of the ideas, and then basically it's just like a building blocks after that and putting things together. So it's usually quite a collaborative process, at least for like the trio and the live stuff. For the album, it was kind of more of like part writing. I was lucky enough to get one of the New Voices commissions for Celtic Connections, and so I got to write for a 7-piece band, which was it was a fab coming together of things, of like this music that was arranged for trio stuff and then building it up for all these different instruments. And I guess like timbre is also a really important thing for me, just like the sounds themselves. And when I started to arrange the album, it was a lot of, like, I was overcomplicating things, and I was, trying to write loads of harmonies because, like, there's 7 people, everyone's got to be busy. Like, nobody can be standing around, but actually realizing that, like, somebody just playing, like, one note is so much more impactful. And it comes back to this thing of, like, the melody is the most important, beautiful thing. And if you can elevate the melody in some way, then, like, that's so valuable. And so I guess, like, The Old Inn is one of the tunes on the album that I wrote way too many harmonies for and things. And then eventually, like, the fiddle, which had a lot of these harmonies, I ended up just playing, like, an A over the whole thing, because it just kind of, it creates this bed for the pipes, and it interacts with the drone on the small pipes, which are also an A. So like in the mixing process, the fiddle A is like the same pitch, but it's a different timbre, and they're like panned either way. So it kind of, at times you can't quite tell which is which, but also because they're like organic acoustic instruments, they interact with each other, and you just get these like gritty, earthy textures that come together. And yeah, so sometimes that is like the biggest inspiration for something, is just like the sound of that like vibration.
Yeah, I feel like texture feels very important in certainly your recorded music.
Yes.
And I think like I know that the last time I spoke to you, you spoke a little bit about Belle and Sebastian as like a particular influence in recording, the kind of like the rough edges.
Yeah.
Which I think really comes through.
Yeah, definitely just like the fun of it, like trying to keep the live fun realness of it. And there's so many times when you can try and clean things up. And I was really, really grateful to have an amazing producer, Andy Bell, who did the album with me. And there was a really nice balance of, he would love something that like to me is a mistake, but he's like, it's real.
Yeah. And
then I would like try and perfect it kind of thing, and then would usually meet somewhere in the middle, or it's like a mixture of things. And I really, as a musician, I do have like, sadly, I have an idea of what is like right and wrong, and so much of like improvising and exploring new work is about like not necessarily undoing, but at least examining and like questioning, like, why do I want this to be right? Like, who am I trying to prove this to? Like, what am I trying to prove?
Yeah.
And
the judges at the piping competitions.
Exactly. I'm still getting over it. So it really is that stuff. Like, it harks back to that. And actually, Nought For Glory, the dance piece it was a little bit like therapy for my music, in a way, of like going like, why do things need to sound nice or like in tune? And it's like, at times it's really practical, but at other times it's like embracing the scratchy sounds in between. And like learning to love that, and learning to like get rid of your inhibitions of that's not right. But I also think that's a process you kind of you don't have to, but I feel like I've needed to go through the process of rejecting that to get to a place where I'm like happy with an exactness and a level of accuracy that then you can come back down from to enjoy the grittiness. And I'm not saying that it's perfect. Like, I'm always striving for that, but it's about the control. It's about the being able to make a choice, like in the moment, I guess. And also just enjoy it. Like, I think it's taken me a while to enjoy performing, really. It was actually after COVID happened, having not performed a gig for like 6 months or something. Just like the privilege of being able to play in front of people again it was actually a beautifully transformative moment of like remembering why I love it and why I do it and why I love performing. And yeah, it just made me realize that like it's about that community and that coming together in a moment and having a shared experience with strangers. Like, and if like an energy or a vibe is going to get you that more than like hitting all your doublings on the pipes, like absolutely, that is like what to strive for.
Hear, hear. You spoke a little bit earlier about improvisation, and I'm interested as to whether there is like a method to it, because I think when you hear someone's kind of works on improv based writing or whatnot, it would be easy to kind of be like, oh well, it's just kind of like open-ended, like you just kind of sit down and you just see what happens. But am I right in thinking you studied improvisation when you were in Finland?
I did a wee bit, yeah. There was like a folk improvisation class. So I did like an Erasmus exchange in Helsinki at Sibelius. And it was just the whole thing was a fab experience, but I had one teacher, Yoko Kuhala, and I should say like improvisation is such a big part of their pedagogy at the Sibelius Academy, but the lessons I got were really like in how do we like micro improvise? So it's like, how do we still play like a melody, but we do it like it can be improvisation in the sense of like the tone of something. And in a way, that's a lot of what you get taught in like, I guess like conservatoires and like more Western classical like styles of like, you know, lean into this note on this bit, but thinking of it as improvisation rather than like written scored dynamics is really, really helpful. And there's a combination of that and then some like totally out there free improvisation. And then when I came back to Glasgow, did some more. But yeah, I think improvisation is like such an inspiring process for me. Like I always get something out of it, even if it was, let's never do that again. That's like really useful because nobody ever needs to hear some of that stuff. But that is really what I love about it. And, you know, to me, improvisation is like the purest form of creating connection with other people, be that audience or musicians. And I think sometimes it's amazing to listen to. Sometimes it's like less enjoyable for an audience at times, but there is always something incredibly like valuable. And I always learn from like every improvisation. And that can be something like repeating a melody like 20 times and it just taking it in different places. And it can also just be playing a drone for like 10 minutes. And it can also be, you know, tapping some bottles together or like just making sounds in like in your living room and like things that sound nice. And like, again, coming back to textures, you know, like the sound of a couch, the sound of a fabric. Yeah,
I'm kind of conscious that I'm wearing quite a noisy shirt today. I'm wondering if this is gonna this is gonna be a problem later on.
The crisp packet jackets.
Yeah.
But it's like things like that. Mike Vass and Myrick Green, two amazing musicians up in the Highlands, they like, to me, they're like my idols of like going into a house and like making an album or like making like percussion tracks out of like everyday sounds and things. And I know they've recorded a beanbag, I think, once as like a bass drum. But like, and then mix it in a way that like you don't notice that. So it's not like, it doesn't sound like somebody throwing a beanbag around.
Yeah.
But it just sounds really natural and like gritty and a bit like, you know, in the way that a beanbag sounds when you chuck it. So
I think it's a real great like Easter egg when you love a track and you listen to it and then you hear that one of the percussion sounds or any sound is like, it's like someone, I think there's a Glasgow-based musician called, I think it's Luke J. I'm sure he had a track once where there was like this clicking noise and it's like nail clippers.
Yeah.
I hope I've got any of those details right.
But it is things like that. It's like hearing the mundane, or hearing the beauty and the joy in the mundane everyday stuff.
Oh, exactly. So we've spoken about your process in a kind of abstract sense, but I'd love for you to talk us through maybe in relation to a particular track. So the second track off of your debut album Halocline, which came out last year, called Trans, which I know you wrote quite a long time ago. I wondered if you could tell me a bit about the process in particular, sort of what was the impetus for writing it? What was the headspace you were in when you wrote it?
So this was like 7.5 years ago. I was just making this new bagpipe, the Lindsay System Chanter.
Which I realised we didn't say earlier, we should have probably said explicitly. Designed by the piper Donald Lindsay. So originally 3D printed.
A lovely friend of mine 3D printed and designed a new type of bagpipe and then let me have a go at making it in wood. And then we've been working together on it since. And so it's a new instrument without a repertoire and a new layout. So it's like a blank canvas really as a sound and as an instrument. I'm also an 18-year-old who's exploring what it means to be trans in the world and about to kind of leave home, I guess, for the first time properly. I guess that was like the headspace I was in, spending many hours in a shed working on this new instrument. And it really came out of the process of like learning it. So like finding almost like a scale, like what notes feel right under it and what's like possible. all the whilst like with an instrument that's completely out of tune because it's like a work in progress. So like the way I'd make pipes is basically get like the chanter without any holes in it, just the hole down the middle, and then just drill like roughly, and then use a Dremel to like carve them bigger, and then use beeswax to like fill in the blanks. So like the first one's like covered in beeswax. It's this like movable entity. But I think I wrote it on that first ever one because it worked surprisingly well, and it was just like such a joy to have this this new creature, this new like muse animal bagpipe thing that you could create sounds on that I'd never thought to create before. So it really came out of like an improvisation, but kind of almost a technical one of like that. All the while, like all these thoughts in my head and all this like thoughts about the world and about identity and, you know, how to make instrumental music like welcoming and accessible to like either queer people or to anyone really.
It's such a joyous track, and it's interesting that you say it's like a technical exercise, because it is quite like, you really like making the use of those chromatics.
Yeah.
But it's just like such a, I think when I said earlier that it feels like you have these kind of like soaring moments, like that specifically, I think about that, it feels like, this might be a really weird comparison, but it feels like, I imagine you could see like a sort of Beauty and the Beast style, like if your pipes were animated, that they'd be like giving a sort of like really fantastic rendition. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's just I really love it. So what about I'm kind of interested in the lifespan of it as well, because obviously you wrote it on, I guess these are yours words, not mine, out of tune pipes. And I think it's quite different to how we might conceive of like the traditional music recording pipeline in like pop music, in that it was written 7.5 years ago, and you have presumably been performing it for quite a long time. You know, is that something that you're conscious of? Do you think that's shaped it? Has it changed over the years, or has it been quite like set?
The tunes kind of remain set, but I think the world that it represents changes. And so it's about how that's shared with an audience, and how I feel playing it in different settings. And yeah, for me it feels like something I will play forever. It's kind of like, it's one of the kind of few tunes that really, really feels like I love it. Like there's always things in different music where it's like, it's not quite perfect, or it doesn't quite hit. But like, to me, that tune is like a really personal thing, and a really something that means something to me and represents something, I guess. It represents a time in my life, but it represents like a political world that we live in. And, you know, I often think that like, had I learnt the oboe, I would be doing the same stuff with the oboe. Do you know what I mean? It's like, this is kind of a tool to express myself, and I will shout for and share the things that I believe in whatever way I can, and that just so happens to be the bagpipes. And I'm really grateful for that. I think it's a beautiful niche, but like really special world. And obviously like super special to Scotland, and super, I think that's a big part of it as well, is like, you know, the bagpipes has baggage in a way. It has a history, and it has representation, and it has cliches, and kind of being able to break out of that and like reclaim that tradition. And I think you said earlier like about the pipes sounding like singing and things, and I've always been super inspired by like Raina Connolly and like Alan MacDonald as singers who play instruments as well, and the way that they, like the power in their voices, and the way that they can paint a melody and give it so many different colours. And like how to do that on an instrument that doesn't have dynamics, that you can't change the volume, and is hard to change the timbre of each note. So it's like thinking about all the different ways to do that. And
that is a much more beautiful way of what I kind of stumbled over earlier with my Beauty and the Beast metaphor. That's what I was trying to say. Well, oh God, thank you so much for sharing that. It's a beautiful track. And I think I hope you wouldn't be insulted if I said, for the benefit of listeners who haven't listened to your music, that it sounds very unlike traditional bagpiping music. It's and I think it's just so interesting that you talk about wanting to kind of break out of the mold and the tradition, but you could not have chosen a more kind of literal way of doing it, handcrafting your own instrument. And it is just, it's so, it reaches these kind of like emotional corners. And it's not to say that I don't find like traditional pipe music like very stirring, absolutely. But it reaches different emotional corners that I think historic bagpiping music, I don't think has reached. Not that I've ever heard it.
Yeah.
Last of all, I guess I'd love to talk to you about what you've got going on. Yeah, we've spoken a lot about things, about your past work. What are you working on at the moment?
Touring the album for the rest of the year now. Doing most corners of the UK, all throughout kind of the summer mostly. In June, super excited to be going to Denmark for the first time, which is going to be a joy. We're doing a couple of dates in sort of southwest Germany in August. A couple of like teaching and gigs in Sweden for the first time.
That's exciting.
So, yeah.
What are you teaching specifically? I mean, I presume...
I'm kind of teaching like Scottish Celtic fiddle and... yeah, that's going to be really nice. And kind of like a youth folk camp thing in the summer. As well as like a couple concerts solo for the first time, which is actually a really exciting thing. I'll tell you more about that one day maybe.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, doing some solo concerts, which is a really, really exciting thing that I'm kind of working on. Exciting for me. I don't know if it's exciting for anyone else. And then as far as Asturias in September, we've got a couple of gigs for the Gaita Festival. In the north of Spain, in Asturias and Galicia, there's like a big piping tradition. So we're going over for a bagpiping festival there, which I'm so excited for.
Brilliant.
It's going to be really fun.
And you'll be in Edinburgh
I will be
at the end of May.
Yeah. So I have been doing some guest programming for the Queen's Hall in Edinburgh. And it's been like a dream job, like basically getting to put together these... putting together 4 concerts of 3 artists each night, just kind of like sharing the people that have inspired me or that do inspire me continuously with their work. And it's been a joy as well being on the other side of that process rather than booking gigs. But yeah, we had the first one a few weeks ago now, and we had Alan MacDonald, Laura Wilkie, and her band, as well as The Breath, which is Stuart McCallum and Raina Connolly. And
it was an incredible... I was there. It was what an incredible lineup.
It was just like amazing thing of like people that have really like inspired me, like Alan. Like I grew up learning his music, and Laura's an amazing advocate for so many things and beautiful things, and just makes the most amazing music. And Raina and Stuart, it's exquisite. They're just like so...
I'd never seen them before, and her voice is just like... Yeah. I was right at the back of the hall, and it was just like, like being hit by a wave. It's incredible, and in a like, positive good way.
I love waves.
Yeah.
Waves are always good. So yeah, it's like, the idea for that concert was like walking songs and keening, though the music in the concert wasn't necessarily that. That was like that's the underlying influences of their music, and Raina's keening styles voice that she weeps almost whilst just singing so exquisitely. It's incredible. So anyway, that was the first concert. And then on the 31st of May, the headliner is Frigg. So this incredible band from Finland, a few of which taught me whilst I was over studying at Sibelius. So they're just like this unreal bluegrassy, folky, I think they call it Finn grass or Nordic grass. I can't remember which one it is. Nordgrass, I think.
Yeah.
And it's just so tight, like 3 fiddles, mandolin, double bass, and guitar, and it's just the arrangements are insane. They're just so beautiful, so complex, and again, like texture, but in the most exquisite, like detailed way. It's really just so many different sounds and gritty strings, like bow hair on strings and plectrums on metal, like all these things. And my lovely friend Marieke is coming all the way from Belgium with her band Marvera. She's like an incredible bagpiper of different sort of Flemish bagpipes and has this just like the funnest live gig. I saw it at Manchester Folk Expo like a couple of years ago now, and it was like the highlight of the festival. It was so fun, and I'm so excited to see them live again. Like it's quite wild and off the rails, but in such a great, just like folky dancey way. It's really like dance music, but in like, I don't know, like all its forms. Like there's a bit of techno, a bit of like Kaylee dancing kind of vibe, but super tasteful at the same time.
The Queen's Hall's not going to know what's hit.
I know. I'm really advocating for a standing gig for that one.
Well, yeah, because I was quite surprised. I got there last time. I didn't realise it was going to be cabaret seating.
Yeah, well, that I really feel like that was like the classy gig of the festival.
So the next one is going to be standing?
I can't divulge that information yet.
Oh, okay.
And then there is...
you have to buy a ticket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And opening the night is an incredible artist, Me Lost Me, Jane Dent, who's coming up from Newcastle, who just does the most beautiful electronic kind of songs. And they have this desk that they perform with, and it's like just covered in pedals and amazing electronics and loopers and things. And yeah, they just create like such a world of sounds with their voice and things. It's really, really fun. They also are like really into making textiles and like interactive textiles that you can like play. So they do like art exhibition type things where you can like play with like a tapestry that's like an instrument. So like total nerding stuff, but it's really, really like really cool work.
God, that's so exciting. So it sounds like this one's going to be a bit more. The last one was a very, again, these are your words, classic. And this is going to be, dare I say, the party one.
I think it's just the like really joyful, like interesting, like some out there stuff and some really, you know, I think it's really sounds that people might not have heard before. Like, and I say that tentatively because it's a bold statement. I think all of the concerts are like that, but like, you know, I guess they're traveling from Europe, a lot of them, and Jane's just a really unique artist. So I'm really excited just to have them all in the same room. Like, what a joy.
I'm so excited too. Well, I'll be there. And I hope that lots of other people are as well. Well, I think that kind of brings us to the end. Nice. Thank you so much for this fantastic chat. It's always a joy. Always very interesting to talk to you. And now I guess I should...
Can I say thanks?
Oh, yeah, you absolutely can.
Thank you so much for having me. No, I'm going to say... Can you say the thing again?
Yeah, of course. What did I say?
You looked thoughtful and then I didn't want to interrupt you.
Thanks for listening to the Music Now podcast, which is hosted by me, Laurie Presswood, and produced and recorded by Peter Simpson. And thanks to Malin Lewis for chatting to us. Malin's debut album, Halocline, is out now via Hudson Records. This episode is sponsored by the Queen's Hall. The next Malin Lewis Presents show is on Saturday the 31st of May, with Frigg, Marvera and Me Lost Me. Find out more about the season of gigs and get tickets at thequeenshall.net. We'll be back with another episode of Music Now next month. Goodbye.